and welcome to ACI Learning's summer webcast series. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Kathy Chambers, and today our presenter, Kathleen Crawford, will be presenting on Agile Auditing, Sprinting to the Finish. Kathleen is an ACI instructor and has more than 25 years in financial services, internal audit, and fraud investigations. She has an MBA, is a member of several professional organizations, and is active in nonprofit organizations holding board-level positions. ACI Learning trains leaders in cybersecurity, audit, and information technology, delivering lifetime learning to 250,000 engaged students, professionals, and organizations across 6 continents. Now, many of you attending today may know or have heard of the MIS Training Institute, or MISTI. MISTI has been training auditors, risk and compliance, fraud, and information security professionals worldwide for over 40 years. MISTI is now a part of and is being rebranded as ACI Learning. Check us out at acilearning.com and follow us on your favorite social media. We encourage you to submit questions as we go along. Just put your questions in the question panel in the GoToWebinar on the right side of your screen. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you within a week. You can also download today's slides and any additional handouts by clicking on the links in the handouts panel. All right, let's welcome Kathleen Crawford to today's webcast. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hi, Kathy. How are you?
I'm great. It's really great to have you here. What are we going to chat about today?
Well, we are talking about agile auditing.
All right.
I start with a definition that I am borrowing from author Rick Wright. Rick Wright is a certified internal auditor. And this will, I think, frame our discussion as we go around the iteration and how that works out. Agile auditing, agile internal auditing, is the use of agile software development values, principles, frameworks, methods, and/or practices in the execution of internal audits. So what Mr. Wright is getting at is that we are adopting a lot of the same values that were expressed in the Agile Manifesto back 20 years ago. I can't believe it's been 20 years. And this is something that's really catching fire in our profession. So I hope that we will be able to illuminate some of the questions that folks might have. So we thought we would start with this cyclical kind of feeling about how these projects can play out. It is important that we are consistent with our audit standards. It's also important that we are realistic about when agile audits will work and when they won't. So some of the situations in which agile audits work really, really well is if project goals are narrowly focused. It doesn't work so well if we have a client or an audit manager who's interested in cramming everything but the kitchen sink into an agile audit. There's not much that we'll be able to do with that. So we want to make sure that our project goals are really, really well defined. And that means that a lot of communication needs to happen up front. So one of the things that characterizes this methodology is to get clients involved sooner rather than later, to welcome them in, to welcome their perspectives, and to be receptive to them. Another aspect of when Agile doesn't work out so well, and when it does, is it works well when we have a small group of people made up of highly qualified individuals. And that means not only qualified internal auditors, but we want people who are good communicators. We want folks to be able to interact with our clientele and draw them out. And we want to be something that I call radically transparent. It's important that we are welcoming, that we don't mind interruption, that we perhaps set up a conference room nearby when we're working in the area processor system so that people can just drop by whenever they want to. Another way in which Agile works very, very well, or situations where it works really well as an audit methodology, is when we can make those decisions quickly, when we can engage those subject matter experts, both inside internal audit and in the client area processor system. If we're talking about a very multi-layered decision-making mechanism, that's not going to work terribly well. So I just wanted to go on the record as saying that this is not necessarily going to apply in all instances. When it does, boy, is it exciting. It's super, super exciting. Take a look at the top of the graphic. I was saying that it's important that we are engaged in communication. So we want to make sure that we plan each iteration carefully. So our planning phase of our audit is going to be very, very robust. It's going to be multi-layered in terms of engaging subject matter experts on our side and on their side. And then we'll step into each iteration that will be very well planned. And that's another exciting thing about this methodology, is that we are using our duty of care throughout this process. We're bringing in a questioning mind. So I had mentioned communication already. That questioning mind is so, so valuable. And we need to set the stage for a lot of critical thinking and assessment of evidence. We certainly want to be alert to any errors, any neglect, or any fraud in any area that we're applying this methodology to, but the iterations will be well planned for team members to accomplish in a way that's probably going to take about 1 to 2 weeks per iteration. Now, it's very visually focused, so you can expect that audit teams will be setting up some kind of visual documentation that they're going to be consulting on a regular basis. There will be, as I say, possibly a war room set up in a visual manner or in a physical manner, so that anyone who wants to track our progress will be able to accomplish that. Let's see what else. In terms of iterations, we want to make sure that auditors are really, really focused on adding value. So what will improve, or what can improve by virtue of the fact that we are there? We want to make sure that stakeholders feel that they're part of the team, and that the team is for one and for all, and that knowledge is going to be transferring back and forth frequently. More traditional ways of internal auditing, I'm sorry to say, sometimes we hold our cards close to the vest. And that's not going to necessarily play out in a good fashion. It's not going to be the modern way of doing things. We want interaction, we want collaboration. The old-fashioned way of auditing is one in where we might be holding our cards close to the vest. So I've been in this profession for a long, long time, and I've worked in a lot of different organizations and a lot of different organizational cultures. And sometimes we evaluate, and fail to communicate with our clientele in a way that is going to be meaningful. So they may feel that we're ambushing them, and this is a way that I think we can really get away from those practices. So as I said, the iteration is going to be something that typically takes 1 to 2 weeks, and each person is going to be working with a visual control board. You'll be able to see the progress. Say a Kanban board will show the progress of the tasks across from waiting to be picked up, going through the process of being picked up and worked on. So we'll be able to see things that are in progress, things that are complete, things that are being evaluated by the Scrum Master. So speaking of the Scrum Master, that is a really important function that the auditor in charge is likely to be embodying, and setting the tone and setting the pace, and being available to answer any questions, and being available to interact with team members and with clientele. So what we need to do in our iterations, of course, is to pinpoint the items that are most important. What can we do to add value? So what are some things that stakeholders may not have considered and that we could bring to the party, if you will? So for one and for all, knowledge transfer is truly, truly important.
Kathleen, can you hear me now?
The next thing that I wanted to focus on was communication. So communication, I said this, the Scrum Master is an important part of the Agile process. So daily stand-up is going to be, just as it is in software development, is going to be part of Agile Auditing as well. And no more than 15 minutes. We want to make sure that each team member is going to step up and speak about what they are in the middle of. What did they finish yesterday? What are they in the middle of? What are they going to do next today? Any problems or issues that they might be encountering. With that daily stand-up process, if there are issues that anyone is having, we're not all going to sit around and talk about them. It's important that these meetings be very brief, very focused, and any issues that need to be dealt with are dealt with one-to-one conversation with our Scrum Master. So that means that we're looking at things from a slightly different angle. We're making sure that our communication is frequent, but not so lengthy that it's going to slow down our process. Some of the biggest challenges that come up with communication are making available time for the client and the client stopping by. That's not a challenge. In fact, it's a welcome opportunity. So I would say the thing to think about is that we are still auditing in accordance with our standards. Our iterations are going to include interviews and testing, just like traditional auditing does. We're going to be validating things with our clients, as I said, on a pretty frequent cadence. And we still also have to prepare our deliverables in terms of our working papers and our audit observations. What's different about this process, however, is that it happens all at the same time. And so this cyclical nature of these iterations, as you see in the graphic, is so vital to delivering those insights on a frequent and a timely basis. So we're not holding back on our audit observations. We're not waiting, or we're not requiring that the client waits to work on the corrective action. In fact, this process encourages working on those insights and determining how they want to fix them sooner rather than later. And this is part of what drives the excitement about we still have to follow, as I said, we still have to follow our standards with regard to work paper preparation. So we want to make sure that we are preparing work papers that tell the story of what we did, what we found, and what we concluded, but are not so bulky and so cumbersome as to slow down the process or to confuse the client in terms of what they can and should be doing to address those areas that they want to improve in some way, shape, or form. As we think about our audit reports, which are another deliverable that's required by our standards, the audit report is going to read much more excitingly. It will tell the story of what we looked at, what we focused on, but we'll also tell the story of what has been already addressed before this audit draft went out. So the ability to communicate in a different way and the ability to share insights and to free the client up to start working on these things as soon as they are desiring to do so, the better.
So
We also
Kathleen,
have
when it comes to communication, what are some of the
iterations as an
biggest
opportunity as
challenges
we're
for
winding
auditors?
down to plan the next iteration. So there's a reflective period in these 1 and 2 week increments where we improve our own process. We get better as we go. So whatever we like or didn't like about how we carried out the first iteration affects the second iteration. Whatever we liked or didn't like about the second iteration affects the third iteration, and so forth. So it's truly, truly exciting that way, and we're improving our process as we go. Another area that I really, really appreciate in Agile auditing is the elimination of excess. I hinted at it with regard to our procedures, but I also hinted at it with regard to our work papers. Our work papers should be thought of as just enough to tell the story. We're not going to be excessive in the collection of documentation. We're not going to be excessive in the collection of data. It's a streamlined process. Our documentation is similarly streamlined. This can sometimes be a challenge to some of our audit team members. And so as we work together with each other, determining, we don't need to dump too many references. We don't need to hold on to things that we looked at just because we looked at them. We're not going to wait until we talk to the client. So again, we're not holding on to things that should be freely shared, that should be brought to the surface sooner rather than later. We don't have time. We have stripped it down to its essence, and we need to make sure that we make very, very good use of our time, very, very good use of our energy. As we think about these things and we work our way around to about the 7 p.m. point on the clock, if we were looking at a clock face, we also use our opportunity to assess. So that reflective period that I was speaking about, that reassessment, as we think ahead to the next iteration and what we could and should be doing in the next group of tasks that we're going to undertake. As you follow the progression of the tasks across the Kanban board, or you look at a visual control board of some sort, the team can really start to see how things are progressing and see the momentum that's building as we're approaching the finish line of the first iteration. So it gives us an opportunity to assess, to be reflective, and then to move forward. And then it's kind of wash, rinse, repeat.
All right, Kathleen, thank you so much. We do have some viewer questions coming in. I understand that maybe you can't hear me right now. So in the meantime, I would like to tell our viewers a little bit about our in-person training that's coming to Orlando very soon. And so you can register for that. You can register for 2, 3, 4, or 5-day courses. To get information on that, you can go to acilearning.com. Kathleen, can you hear me?
I sure can.
So I apologize for some of our not being able to hear back and forth. I had a lot of questions for you too.
I thought that you might have done.
Yes. All right, listen, so I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions, and then our viewers have written in a couple of questions for you as well. Okay. I would like to ask though, during the planning phase and the communication phase, and pretty much throughout the whole process, you had mentioned that it's super important to have the stakeholders in these conversations with you as we're going through this process. My first question is, are there too many cooks in the kitchen at that point? Too many people trying to get a hand in what the process should be like?
It's an excellent question, Kathy. And I, I hate to quibble on this, but I would say it depends. So in terms of our planning phase for the audit, this is still going to be fairly typically long. So deciding who's going to be involved and deciding who is going to have a more active role and more of an inactive role is something that would be decided during planning. In Agile auditing, the idea is to have a preliminary discussion with whoever is in charge of the area process or system that we're auditing, and to set up an initial schedule. But the planning phase that flows from that is actually going to be super, super robust. So it does affect, it will affect how many people, how many cooks you want to have contributing to the soup, if you will. So there are things like initial research, which auditors who are not familiar with Agile auditing would recognize. Standard operating procedures, guides, best practices, policies, procedures, all of the normal research that auditors are accustomed to doing. Then it dovetails a little bit. So the next phase and the next stage in planning is going to be mini current state workshops, walkthroughs, what's called a Gemba walk. So if you're looking at the graphic here, this actually precedes the iteration. All of this work, all of this discussion helps us. We'll have our normal risk assessment procedures that we do. We'll draft some control objectives with the client. And then we start thinking about the program itself and what each iteration might be able to accomplish. And here's where I'm answering your question. I'm sorry for the long wind up, but in order to be able to decide who's going to be involved, we need to go through all of that and then discuss with the client, with all the clients, who are the subject matter experts who would like to walk alongside us for iteration one, because we're going to be focused on a handful of aspects of the area processor system that we're auditing. Who might like to be involved in iteration number 2, which is going to focus on other things. So so it isn't the free for all that I might have suggested that it is. It is systematic, it is disciplined. We're making sure, but we're making sure that we invite subject matter experts to be part of the process if they so choose. And leading back to the point about communication, having somebody in the room with you, virtually or physically, depending on what your working arrangements are, is a way to cut through a lot of red tape and a lot of confusion. And so there's a lot to be said for having SMEs be part of this with internal auditors. The knowledge transfer is very nearly seamless, and it's really exciting because it cuts down on time and smooths out the bumps that we might otherwise have experienced.
All right, great. Thank you so much for that. So to our viewers, I just want to remind you that now is an awesome time for you to send in your questions in the question panel in the GoToWebinar. That should be there on the right side of your screen. We do have some questions coming in, Kathleen, so let's get to them. Our first question is, I have heard that Agile may not be applicable, I'll get that out eventually, to regulatory compliance audits. What are your thoughts on that?
I respectfully disagree. I think once you have yes, the planning is important. The research is going to be important. I think the person who submitted the question does have a point in that Agile audits right now are probably more common in operational projects a little less common in financial audits and in regulatory audits, but that doesn't mean that they can't be done. For example, I long before I understood what Agile auditing was, I had a compliance project that I had to do, and the manager who was in charge of that area that I was auditing insisted that I use a team member as a subject matter expert, as a liaison, is the way that he expressed it. And as I reflect back on it, this project actually very, very regulatory based, very, very intensively focused on the laws and regulations that this organization had to follow in this specific area. But because of that interaction and because of that embedded expert, it made the audit go so much more smoothly. And so when I think back on it, I really think of it as a precursor to what we now know as Agile auditing.
All right. Our next question is from Martin out of Brussels. Martin, thank you so much for your question. Some big and well-established IA departments tend to emphasize detailed audit documentation to enable re-performance and full compliance with standards. How would you convince the management that by moving Agile and removing excess documentation, they can still maintain full conformance with those standards?
How can I convince them? Try it. I really, because I have been in internal auditing for a long time, and because I've worked in the financial services sector, I've worked in the nonprofit sector, I have seen over and over again the collection of data and documents by the pound. And so I do believe that with discipline, I think that we can strip that back. In fact, there's a lot of really, really good work paper software that sort of creates frameworks for the collection of data in such a fashion as to tell the story of the audit, but not have it be onerous.
All right. And the next question is from Alex. And Kathleen, you sort of touched on this, but Alex would like to know what the fundamental differences are between traditional auditing and agile auditing, and why you believe that agile auditing is necessary.
Well, the difference is, I think that there's more relevant value delivered sooner in agile auditing. I think there's a tendency in traditional audits to hold off and make the big ta-da at the end of field work. I also, I think another big difference is that cadence of communication. So the cadence of communications with the daily stand-up, it not only level sets for the day what everybody's going to be working on, but it also pinpoints sometimes when there's duplication of effort that people did not have an appreciation for, which then makes us more agile and more properly directed to the different areas that we're supposed to be focused on. So it helps eliminate that duplication. So if I'm marching to my own beat and you're marching to your own beat and we're not communicating with each other, then we might actually be like those 5 blind men describing an elephant. We're looking at it from different angles, but we're still looking at the same thing. Another aspect of Agile that I have a great appreciation for is that the feedback that we're giving is more timely. We're not waiting until the end, as I had said, and the documentation is more streamlined. So those are a lot of different reasons, but common reasons why people really like Agile auditing.
All right, good points there. Next question is from Curvin. Do you agree that agile auditing will depend on the internal culture of the audit clients and the audit managers as well?
Kervin, thank you. No, seriously,
Culture is so important, isn't it?
it's incredibly
Hmm.
important. And that is an excellent, excellent question. Perhaps I should have made that point in response to the earlier question. Yes, it makes a big, big difference. So we have to be ready for it. We have to be careful in what we promise. So it's important not to overpromise and underdeliver. Um, Culturally, yes, we're talking organizational culture, and there can be a lot of different strands of what people prefer. And not for nothing, whenever we try something new, it can be a little bit daunting. You can feel that it's, am I ready for this? Do I know how to do this? No, I'm going to stay back over here because I know how to do this thing. But it's definitely the wave of the future.
All right, next question is in from, and I'm going to apologize if I butcher this name. I think it's Chaz or Chas, C-H-A-S. So if you're listening right now and I got your name wrong, my apologies. But let's get to that question from you. He asked, how long does it typically take to get an audit team up to speed on the process of agile auditing when it's first adopted into those IAs?
Chaz, please believe me when I say that I'm not ducking the question, but it does depend. And so a couple of things that I would suggest is that when trying to ramp this up, try a couple of pilots first. So an earlier question was whether or not compliance audits could be done in an agile fashion, and I do believe that they can. But your initial pilots might be more in the operational space to work out some of the kinks. Another thing that I would definitely advise is to make sure that you have sufficient time to stand up a pilot. Sometimes audit committees, sometimes chief auditors are scheduling you guys wall to wall, and there might not be, there might not be a chink, there might not be space for you to try something new because you don't know how long it's going to take. So a practice that I've heard from a couple of colleagues is to make your annual budget such that you reserve some time to be experimental, and you reserve some time to respond to specific requests, to do a quicker turnaround audit, something that in an area that you hopefully know well and would be willing to have a willing partner on the client side to try it out.
All right, and Chaz,
It's might come
yeah,
forward.
good advice there. Chaz has another question for you, Kathleen. He asked, how do you balance agile and micromanaging, including distinguishing between the two during that agile process?
So the micromanaging, I think if I'm putting words in your mouth, Chaz, I'm sorry, but you might be worried a little bit about your Scrum Master. So is your Scrum Master, is he or she intensely involved and just wandering around seeing what you're doing? That goes back to the point about culture, is that there has to be a willingness to allow people to work independently. And if they're communicating thoroughly, it should not be an issue. That said, I can appreciate where the impulse comes from, especially if this is a something, an experiment, a brand new experiment that you're trying to see what kind of value you can deliver, what kind of new insights are there to be mined, if you will, and delivered to the client. So I would say, with regard to micromanaging, setting up the expectations and visually depicting with some kind of visual board so that anyone who's interested can see the progress of the work that's being done from day to day, and sometimes even from hour to hour. You can see the progression of the work packages throughout the Kanban board, if that's part of your visual control board. If you prefer those Harvey bubbles, the coloring in of the progress of specific parts of the process. The visual feedback should hopefully be sufficient to cut down on that micromanaging.
All right, and Kathleen, before we say goodbye, I think it would be really nice to get to one of your last graphics on the attributes of Agile auditing and why it's so good and efficient for IAs to use or experiment using. Could you pull that up for us, and let's take a look at that?
Well, yes. So delivering value is paramount, and the idea that we have something new to say is, I think it's important, and it's far more likely. It's a bit of a chemistry experience, because the ability to look deep into something where you might have been skating on the surface before in a similar audit allows us to deliver on new insights, looking at something from a different angle. That collaboration too also has a big role to play. So that using Agile means delivering value, delivering insights that we might not have had the opportunity to see before, because we were focused in a more straight ahead kind of sense. Now we're looking 360 degrees around the area processor system with regard to whatever objectives we have agreed to with the client. Speaking of clients, involving the client is something that I've spoken about at some length, and making sure that we are communicating on a regular cadence. So one thing that I do, which is a little bit additive to some of the tools and the processes I've spoken about, is I develop a communication plan with each of the audits that I do, be they agile or not agile, and look around to see who the stakeholders are within the area processor system that we're auditing, upstream and downstream of that particular area that we're focused on, and determine whether or not there are people that should be kept in the loop in some way, shape, or form. So once we've identified those stakeholders, we're going to involve them. We're going to communicate on an agreed upon cadence. So the Scrum Master or a designee in the audit team is going to need to check in with each one of those stakeholders and find out how frequently they would like to be informed of what the progress is, and always welcome them to stop by whenever they would like. So the door is open, but if it's not convenient for you to stop by virtually or physically, then how would you like us to keep you up to date, let you know what kinds of activity we're involved in, let you know what kinds of results we're having, let us know what the frequency is that works for you, and we'll put it together in our communication plan and make sure that we activate it. Which leads me to discipline. Whatever promises you make, you absolutely positively must follow through on them. So be careful what you promise. I think I might have said something about this: under promise and over deliver. So let's have the discipline every day to do what we said we were going to do, to follow through, to make sure that we stay focused on those things that are in process, not looking back to what's on the board that hasn't been started yet. That doesn't concern us yet. What concerns us is what we have in progress and what we're finding, what we're concluding, what new insights are coming in, how we're documenting that work. Again, not excessive documentation, but streamlined documentation that tells the story of what we did, what we found, and what we concluded. The timely feedback of all sorts to those clients that we involved, and interacted with and said, how often would you like to hear from us? We're going to communicate with that frequency that we've agreed to. And be mindful that it may be different from person to person, but we're trying to be adaptive. We're trying to be provide good customer service. And then document the work in the streamlined fashion that I spoke about before, but not so much that we're collecting every single thing and dumping everything into the work papers. Because as long as there's enough documentation that any reviewer or any interested party could look through and understand what we did, what we found, and what we concluded, we're good.
All right, let's take one final question. This one's coming to us from Reina from India. In Agile auditing, humility is critical and admitting to vulnerabilities is important so that the know-all attitude does not cut off the auditor from the auditee. Do you agree? Thanks in advance for your insights.
Simply stated, I agree. I fully agree with you, Reina. I love the fact that you used the word humility. Auditors are never going to be expert in the areas, processes, and systems that we audit. I think we do have to be humble. Don't get me wrong, there are some great things that we bring to the table, but we want to partner with people who are more expert than us to get that knowledge, to drive the project that we've agreed to do in an agile fashion, and to make it more likely that all will come out the other side with a better understanding of what's working well, what might not be working so well, what needs to change, why it might need to change, and the freedom to start working on things sooner rather than later.
All right, Kathleen, thank you so much for your time. We have a lot more on Agile auditing and all kinds of audit courses any audit course that you can think of, we probably have it. It's on Audit Pro TV. Let me tell you a little bit about that. That is a subscription-based, on-demand audit training. It's very effective and engaging. A one-year subscription costs less than a 3-day classroom course, and you can access the training anytime from anywhere. Just visit acilearning.com to learn more about Audit Pro TV. And Kathleen, we have some very good news that classroom training is coming back in December. Is that right?
That's right, Kathy. We are super excited about that. This December, we're going to offer a week of in-person training classes in Orlando, in Florida, right next to Disney World. If you're eager to get back in the classroom, eager to meet face-to-face with your colleagues, please do consider coming to visit Disney and earn your CPE credit. We've got 2-day classes, 3-day classes, everything from 2 days to 5 days. To choose from. So there definitely is something there for everyone.
All right, thank you, Kathleen. So for our viewers, if you are interested in Audit Pro TV or interested in hanging out with us in Orlando, just visit acilearning.com and all the details will be there for you. For Kathleen Crawford, I'm Kathy Chambers. That's all the time we have for today. We hope to see you again soon.